listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and people who play it. Today is July 30th, 2023, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the pod. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host Jason Lucas, but we're not alone, Jason. We're here doing a bit of a bonus episode, and this one we brought in our friend of the show, Sloot. So our friend Sloot, or Ted, is here to join us, and we're going to be chatting a bit about his experience around video gaming in general, but also World of Warcraft, since he's recently announced his retirement from the mythic raiding hardcore race scene that he was participating in, and taking a bit of a break, or at least undetermined length break from World of Warcraft for the foreseeable future.
Good to be here.
Well, welcome. Man. Well, let's start it off with, how you first got into video games. Like, what was your first experience with video games? What was the hook for you?
First experience with video games. I was, kindergarten in Ottawa, and my parents bought me a Super Nintendo with not Mario. Actually, Mario was not the first game. It was Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past.
Oh, good choice.
Wow, what a way to start off. Yeah,
that was, and then Mario, followed that. So
it's their fault, really. They hooked you immediately with a good game.
I'm so mad at them after all these years. So that was the first experience, and I remember I was very young. Obviously, I remember the very first castle in the game had these skeletons. And they were legit scary for me. So I had to have my sister do
Nice.
the dungeon at the time. But yeah. And then, the rest is, I became an avid Nintendo fan and gamer throughout all my youth, up to the GameCube until it got stolen.
Oh, geez.
And then I think that's when the main convert. Well, not that's when, but like that helped propel the final conversion into more like PC gaming.
Yeah.
And any return to console was PlayStation 4 Pro. So big old gap in there.
Wow. All right. As far as PC games go, was your first leap into something like World of Warcraft, or were there other games? Were there like King's Quest or other games before then?
Oh yeah, King's Quest was a big hit. Yeah, for sure. With it was big. Yeah, no, a lot of the classics. Red Alert was on there, and a bunch of different Command and Conquer games. Like you're saying, like King's Quest, StarCraft at some point. A lot of the OGs definitely, played the field of those a bit. Diablo 2 OG when it came out, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. So what was, did you hop into World of Warcraft the moment beta kind of kicked around, or were you someone who, like, was there anticipation for this game for you, or is it?
Yeah, yes and no. So I didn't actually play beta, believe it or not, but I did play obviously vanilla early on. And the way that happened was because I was playing my first ever MMO experience was actually Guild Wars.
All right.
And then I was waiting for like an expansion for it, and I went to the local Gamerama, and I was like, hey, when's the expansion coming in? And they're like, oh, not for a while, and then they like beckoned me over into the dark corner, like, have you heard of World of Warcraft? So I was like, hey, what's that? And they're like, they had the box there, and I was like, oh, sure. I was like, for me, it was like, I don't know, man. It's, because you're young, right? You don't have money. I was like, subscription. I got to ask my parents. I was like, that's crazy. And I was like, I guess, I'll try it. Whatever. Sure. I'll ask my parent. I can throw $15 a month. And I just won't eat for a week. It's fine. And here we are.
Yeah.
19 years later.
Man. Jason, do you want to hop in with any questions?
Well, I guess the one thing about was Guild Wars the only MMO you had tried, or had you kind of, there was, back in, we're talking 2004-ish, MMOs were a pretty wide space. Everybody was trying to get the next EverQuest or whatever, basically. And I myself had played a lot of those games, and nothing really stuck for me too much until WoW. Was Guild Wars kind of just like your home base, or did you try a lot of the other stuff that was out there back then?
No, it was just Guild Wars. It was my first MMO experience, and then that dove straight into WoW, and then just like no MMOs for decade and a half. And then eventually, through streaming, maybe like a sponsorship deal, or everyone's like, hey, try this. You try like, the WildStar coming out. There's big hype. Let's try that and that kind of stuff. Obviously, nothing really had that, for me at least, that staying power like WoW did. So it was Guild Wars into WoW. That's it.
Were you into the Warcraft RTS at all? Like, were you a Warcraft fan before
I played
WoW, or do you have any knowledge of the franchise or the setting coming into it?
I played Warcraft 2 a bit, and definitely dipped into Warcraft 3, Frozen Throne stuff. Not substantially. Like, I know it was definitely a pretty big craze back then, and hugely popular, and that's why the anticipated remake that came out that didn't do so great, but that came out was rabid fan base waiting for it. So I wasn't like to that level, but I was definitely familiar with things. But undoubtedly most of the lore development for the game came through World of Warcraft.
So where did you start in WoW? What was your faction? What was your race? What was your class that you chose to first explore when you stepped into this world?
So I'll never forget this. I made a Night Elf warrior. And back then I was very like, I was like, ooh, let's be sneaky and RP. So I made a Night Elf warrior named Star Shadow because it,
nice
Night Elves and stuff.
Yep.
And I was running around Teldrassil at level 3 or 4, exploring stuff. And I went to there's a couple of quests that are like overhanging on the branches, if you guys remember back in the day. And I fell off the branch at like level 3 or 4. And I had no idea, like literally my first experience with that, right? I had no idea how to get back, spirit res, all that kind of stuff. So I just made a new character. So I made a new character.
Oh, no.
Real RP. This character is now permad. I'm just going to start a new one. It's real hardcore. So
yeah, you were playing hardcore before it was even a fad in WoW.
I was going to say everyone's playing hardcore now, man. I invented hardcore. And I made a rogue, Night Elf rogue, right after that, which also ended up being Star Shadow because I deleted the warrior. And then that ended up being my main all the way until the end of Old War.
Wow, end of Old War, man! You were committed. Were you playing alts during that whole time? Like, were you exploring other classes?
Well, yeah, because I became like a tank guy.
Right.
So I was maining rogue for raiding and stuff until end of Old War. Still to this day, as far as I know, it's super hard to fact check because back then the community was like forums and stuff.
Yeah.
But at least from what I've heard and talked to devs, one of, if not the first, world Warglaive set on that rogue.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
My rogue has the OG set of twin blades.
Okay.
So that was my main until the end of Old War, but about halfway through BC is when I was like, man, Protection Paladin looks really fun. Holy Shield at the time reflecting, Mount Hyjal in BC was when
your alt
Paladins flourished, right? Because of the trash of that. Everyone's like, oh man, Holy Shield's crazy OP. And I was like, oh, it looks fun and consecrated and holy warriors. And so that's when I made my Paladin, which later became iconic for me in, the raiding or the streaming life. But I didn't main that until TOGC. That's when I made the swap to tanking from Rogue.
Okay. Well, before we dive too deep into the expansions of the time that passed, I was curious to know about the alt situation for you, because I do know you leaned into tanking a bit hard there. But the early days of World of Warcraft. So, what was sort of your life like around the game? Were you someone who would rush home from school or whatever it is you were participating in and just dive right in, or were you someone who sort of had like set play times that worked well? Like, how supportive were you? It was your life, family, whatever, around video games?
So the answer is it was very destructive.
Yeah. Okay.
It was there was no rushing home from class to play it. There was I don't go to class because I'm playing it.
Right.
It honestly, it became kind of problematic at times for sure. Relationships at the time suffered. Gaming was different back then, right? It's not nearly the industry that exists today. Twitch didn't exist back then. All this kind of stuff. So gaming was definitely very much a old school stereotypical nerdy thing. Parents are like, this is not going to get you anywhere. You got to be a doctor. You got to be a lawyer. That kind of. And my parents are hard ass Eastern European kind of, or at least were at the time. So I was studying to go to med school at the time. that obviously didn't pan out. So yeah, no, it had vastly taken over. Like Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King time was like everything else in life came after World of Warcraft. Like it was hardcore.
Yeah. Okay.
Hours and hours and hours and hours a day.
Yeah, but I know that that streaming wasn't always sort of the profession that you did to sort of make money and support yourself when it came to this sort of thing. So you must have obviously found time to get into a career of some sort to support yourself around these sorts of things. What drew you to? Well, first of all, what did you get into to sort of keep yourself afloat, pay your subscription, if you will, that kept you going before you started streaming?
I was working so I ended up essentially freelancing web design front end. So CSS, HTML, all that kind of stuff, designing websites. So that was, I was never, I had done the cold calling center 8 to 5 job and all that kind of stuff. So I'd done the office lackey environment, so to speak. And I was just, it just wasn't for me. I always was somebody that needed, even with school, with whatever, that had to be their own boss, or make their own schedule. Even if I'm not my own boss, have like a fluid kind of, lenient schedule. So self-employed essentially with web design. So I was already, at the computer working from home. WoW addiction was rampant, etc. And then that, eventually I was like, hey, what's this Twitch thing? At the time it was Justin TV. And then there was also MLG TV. And then, the rest is, well, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. But the transition to start streaming, what was the initial drive to start? Were you watching other content creators and thought, hey, I could probably do that too? Or like, what was
I didn't even know it existed. The drive was, so in Midwinter at the time, OG Guild, obviously retired now. This was in around, it's hard to remember exactly, around MOP. MOP beta is when I had my first stream ever. So it was around early MOP. Basically, MLG TV, which existed at the time, doesn't anymore, approached Midwinter to, start getting people to stream raids, and raid leaders like, hey, this is happening. And I was like, oh, but I made like a Twitch account or a Justin TV account and blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of the initial, I was like, hey, there's potentially money involved in this and people are kind of getting interested in this. And, let's just, I'm already playing the game nonstop.
Right.
I'll just put the camera on while I do it and show people what I do. Like I'm already playing this thing 12 hours a day or whatever. So that's kind of how it started and snowballed. And in my parents' basement at the time, because I couldn't live in Montreal anymore because I didn't know French, so it was hard to get a job there. So what does every post grad student do? They move back home with mom and dad and save money from rent and food and stuff. And yeah, just started streaming there. And the goal was, the Twitch didn't, and I think it's still the same now, they didn't pay you out unless it was a minimum 100 for the month. $100 back in my day was, a little more money than it is now.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy though, but
exchange rate was better too, so it factored more. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the first goal was like, let's see if I can, make 100 eventually, and then slowly built up. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how did you get from, hey, I made Star Shadow the Rogue running around Teldrassil, to I'm raiding with Midwinter? Like what was the journey of finding, like, where was your first raid? Like what was your first raid that you got into?
My first raid ever was AQ20.
Oh, okay.
I think, I can't even remember. Or MC. No, I stepped foot into Molten Core. Not very successfully, might I add. And then AQ after that. And then I dabbled like very lightly in end vanilla stuff. Like very lightly in Nax. I would say my hardcore quote unquote rating really just started in BC. Like launch of BC was like, I got like a taste of it in Classic, and I was like, I wanna go in. All right. Yeah. I'm really into this game.
So go ahead.
Yeah.
No.
Oh no, so I was gonna say my first guild ever, like for raiding, was called Zulu Syndicate. And it was just the old, the oldest old school stuff you can think of. There was people posting on forums that we're looking for a DPS and whatever. And there's, I don't think WoW Progress even existed. Did it exist back then? No. And it was just that kind of thing, word of mouth. And then it was really just forum posts, and you would go to guilds had websites, right? You would go to guild websites and you would apply there, their application page and stuff. And just like any corporate business, you climb the ladder, One guild's not rating hard enough for you. You want to take it to the next step. Hey, let's apply to this guild. Hey, here's logs didn't really exist back then, but here's, word of mouth. And back then, your credentials are really what bosses have you killed, more or less. And how often do you play the game?
Well, a piece of trivia for you there. WoW Progress launched during Sunwell. That was when it first came out. So it is
pretty early.
Yeah, pretty early. It's still surprisingly earlier than you think, because back then we're still using Alakazam for actually looking stuff up. The Canadian version of Wowhead that existed back then. A lot of different websites that people were using for finding that kind of information about the game. But then, as far as teams go, recruiting, progression of teams, it didn't kick off until back in the Sunwell days. So it's been quite a bit.
I was going to ask, was there a kind of a pivot point or like a moment where like I want to play at the top end of this game? But it sounds like once BC came out that you sort of just started down that path immediately. You're talking about having, possibly world first or very early, like Warglaves and all that. I mean, it sounds like you were just, focused on getting to the top of rating like right away. Is that true? Or were you kind of dabbling a bit and then sort of working your way up, one plateau at a time?
No, it's definitely true. I was never one to do like the casual or more casual raid scene. It just wasn't, for me, it was just like all in or bust. That's just kind of who I am as a gamer. Every time we turn on a new game, it's what's the hardest difficulty, I want to challenge myself. I like Souls games. I like things like that. So for me, the WoW equivalent was like, Pokemon style. I want to be the best, and like let's do it. It was always about, but just like, it was the same 17, 16 years ago in BC that it is now. You don't just start the game and go, hey, I want to apply to, Liquid and Echo right now, right? Or back then, Death and Taxes, things like that. That doesn't happen, right? You got to get experience, and you got to get references, and you got to get boss kills and all that kind of stuff. So, but the goal in my mind was always like, I think it would kind of, it was its own feedback loop, right? Because the more I rated, the more I got a taste of like the hardcore pushing, and the more I wanted to do it. And then you apply to, a better guild, and a guild that goes more hardcore, and you keep going, and then, keep going to the top.
Was there strong connections for you with the people you were playing with, or was it more of a single player? These people are here, but they're, more co-workers than they are, actual friends and buddies that I want to hang out with and continue to play with regularly in those earlier days, right? I mean, nowadays your mentality shifted a bit, but in those earlier days.
No, absolutely. They were like, I remember when I left the Zulu Syndicate guild, when I left my first guild to apply elsewhere, was like really tough. Like I felt really guilty, because these were guys that you talk to. It was just a different, the vibe, the vibe, everything was just different back then. You didn't have Discord and stuff, right? Your Discord, your chat you didn't have this kind of global community at your fingertip. Your community was your guild. You'd log in and say hi in guild chat, and everybody said hi, like what's going on today, and you look at your last online in guild and who's online, and do some whispers, and you'd have like, the tank channel and the healer channel and all that kind of stuff. So it was a tight-knit community, and it really kind of forced that, almost forced friendships in a way, like you couldn't help but feel that camaraderie between people. Mm-hmm. So it was really tough, like leaving, like it was very guilty, and I felt like I was letting the fam down, but I have to do what I wanted for myself too, right?
Yeah, no, it's something we always encourage on the show is, it's at the end, it's your $15. You got to be sure you're having fun with what you're choosing to do with it. And you got to make those decisions for yourself to make sure you're enjoying your experience as much as possible. Because I think a lot of people suffer from that feeling of guilt, or like they owe something to their team to be there. And we'll certainly get deeper into that later on in our discussion when it comes to how much onus you feel and responsibility you feel for always being there and always being available to this group of people that you sort of play with. Okay, so you made the leap. Was the leap primarily to like Midwinter was in Burning Crusade? That was the team that you landed on when you're doing
no, Midwinter. So all the hopping and all that kind of stuff. I joined Midwinter at the end of Wrath of the Lich King, actually.
Oh, okay.
When they were doing Halion, and like late Wrath, like that's when I joined them. Obviously, the guild had spawned prior to that. I actually don't even remember exactly when Midwinter started, but so pretty early on, at least, as far as Midwinter days are concerned. But yeah, no, there was a few different guilds that I applied to and went to throughout BC/Wrath to get to Midwinter.
Man, okay. So what team were you with when you got the glaives? Like, you were clearly competitive during that time. Was there a...
That's a good question. I think it was still Zulu Syndicate at the time. I can't remember for sure. So I think so.
So Zulu Syndicate you were with for you joined inside Classic and you raided through.
No, I joined them at the beginning of BC. I was a noob nomad during Classic. Believe it or not, pug raiding did exist back then, right? Back in Classic. It was just different. It was more, hey, we're looking, my buddies we're doing AQ20, things like that. We need one more guy. Can you go in? I was like, sure, man. I got blue daggers and I got the purple lobotomizer from running Alterac Valley for the rest of my life and all that kind of stuff. So, but no, the first guild application of the Zulu Syndicate was BC. Now, I mean, to a certain extent, the Warglaves being, world first, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, some of that's just RNG, right? Was our guild the first to clear BT back in the day? Like, no, not even close, right? Like, we were like a hardcore guild. We did pretty well. It just so happens that I was lucky enough to have both Warglaves drop pretty early on, right? Whereas there were guilds that had killed it prior to us, and I mean, Warglaves were, it was old school, right? Like, just it either drops or it doesn't. There was no crafting mats. There was nothing. It's just did a Warglaive drop? Is it a main hand or an offhand? Cool, give it to the rogue. Nice. It was a crime to give it to a warrior back then.
It was a crime.
Absolute crime.
That's
well, like, I mean, no wonder you felt guilty about leaving that guild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Glaives. Yep.
See, this guy, he comes, he gets both the Warglaves, and he leaves, of course.
Well, he didn't leave till the next expansion, so there's a little bit of forgiveness.
That's true, but still, I bet for many years they told that story.
I'm sure they did. The rogue.
The rogue with the two Warglaves who disappeared.
Yeah.
I was actually primed to get the Sunwell bow as well, because our first hunters were not good on Kill Jaden back in the day, like of actual progression after Muro when we brought 5 warlocks and stuff. So our first kill was hunterless, and they're like, if the bow drops, it's gonna go to, well, I was known as Star at the time, it's gonna go to Star Shadow. And I was like, all right, let's go. It didn't drop. I was really upset. It dropped on the second kill when we did bring a hunter in, and I was like, nah.
Well, for another piece of trivia, Midwinter actually started in 2006, October 2006. So it was prior to Burning Crusade's launch. So by the time you joined them during Wrath of the Lich King days, they were pretty well established as a group by that point. I mean, a guild that's a couple of years old is actually quite an old guild at this point of the lifespan of it. So you hopped in with them during Wrath of the Lich King. You were talking about, towards the end of that expansion, based off the bosses that you were mentioning.
Correct.
So, man, what was it like to join this, established progression high-end team? Did you feel like you were prepared for this leap? Were you nervous? Was this like oh my goodness, this is going to be me getting in over my head? Or were you like, no, I'm good, we're ready to go, confident DPS kind of position?
Well, I had swapped a tank at that point. Remember, End of Oldor is when I made my swap, so I was still kind of fresh debuted in the tank world right now. Wrath of the Lich King late game prop paladin was one of the golden glory days of prop paladin, right? That's when Ardent Defender was a passive auto proc and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, it was a mix of both, right? It's always a bit nerve wracking because you're trialing, right? Especially as the tank, right? If I screw up, like we wipe, we die. Everyone knows if you screw up, it's not like, oh, his numbers are a bit low. It's like, oh, he died and we just wasted 10 minutes. And But I was so into the game that I was also super confident because I don't know, I just felt like I was continuously aiming to master and mastering different parts of the game. And I'm a very numbers oriented guy, so I'm obsessed with numbers and min maxing, as far as you could min max back in those days. And so it was, a little bit of both. But yeah, I mean, you do have, 20, 25 eyes on you kind of thing back then, right? It was 25. Well, actually, when did 25? Yeah, it was BC that 10, 25 changed. So yeah, you have 24 sets of eyes on you.
Yep. Did you always have this sort of spreadsheeting going on outside of the game, or like when did the raid, when did you get exposed to or decide to start doing this outside of game paperwork that you do to support the raiding in game, preparing yourself for the raiding? Was that Zulu Syndicate? Was that?
I mean, depends how detailed we're talking here, right?
Sure.
You'd have a little notepad with notes or stickies around the corner of your monitor to make note of, boss timer. Like Dungeon Journal didn't exist in BC, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it was, the boss, Illidan freezes you in place and summons, those eye stalkers to come and kill people. Like this is what happens. It's at this percent, So I mean, early days in terms of just taking general notes for the raid. Now, for my like going kind of nuts and stuff, probably like MOP era, Kata era. End of MOP is really when I started, and not that I literally started the wave, but it started becoming more popular amongst like top players and guilds to start multi-tuning and alting and that kind of stuff. Up until that point, most people had a tune. Maybe you had an alt, like I did. I had rogue, and then I went into tanking, but I still love my rogue kind of thing. But like the real like multi-tuning, especially like competitively, started late MOP, mid-late MOP.
And that's where you felt like you started doing a lot more of the work outside of the game when it came to it.
Yeah, because things started getting more and more competitive, right? That was in the days of Method, Blood Legion, Midwinter, Trio kind of thing. And that's when, I just, everything's just progressed since then with Race World First more and more and more.
Yeah, no, it certainly has.
And obviously, Paragon before that, not to ignore them, but Paragon was kind of done by MOP.
There was a lot of teams at that point. It was definitely, I mean, end of Wrath of the Lich King was a time when there were so many, because there was such a huge explosion in subscription base, so many teams competing at a very high level. It was a very flush time for the player base. A lot of different kinds of development started happening around add-ons around the game. Do you remember some of your earliest add-ons that you were using at all?
Gear Score.
Yeah.
What was the damage meter back then? Skada? Or there was one before it, Recount.
There was Recount, yep.
So I think Recount and or Skada, one of those two. Power auras prior to weak auras.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started, because obviously I got really into weak auras. I made my own UI these days. But that's when I started, getting really into it. Although power auras I think was until like Kata or MO. I definitely had it in MOP. I don't know if it was Kata. But I mean back in the day, it was like a damage meter, deadly boss mods, and that's it.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much
There
available.
Wasn't. Yeah, it's I remember the days when it was 5 or 6 add-ons that you'd run. There was a threat meter in there you'd probably run as well.
Omen, that's right.
Yep,
yeah.
Omen threat meter. That would be a big one to be running for a tank. Or as a DPS too, because
even as a DPS, because I mean, it was real like ripping threat back then.
You need to know when you were getting close to the tank. When you knew that when you moved into melee range, it was like your threat was increased by 50% or something. If you were in melee range, there was a certain percentage that it leapt. Yeah,
it's a 10% threshold. It still exists now. It's a 10% threshold in melee. It's 30% at ranged.
Right, that's what it was. Yeah. So it's
if there's a warlock cranking and the boss is dragging near the warlock, or they run into all of a sudden the boss turns and taps them, and like stupid tank, and it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, that's where the truthful stereotypical meme came from of wait for 3 Sunders, right?
Yep.
Because you literally had to wait for 3 Sunders. Like you just couldn't build threat fast enough often.
A certain amount of global cooldowns for sure that had to happen, which was time passing. And it's Man, those were the old school days of stuff when it came down to that. But since you sort of, what was in those first days? I mean, obviously Warglaives would be huge, but in your early career, what was something that still sticks out to you as like a huge achievement for you guys? Whether it was with Midwinter or whatever it was. I mean, Warglaives obviously being big, but what was sort of like your first big, oh my god, I can't believe we did it. We're so great, or I'm so great kind of moment for you.
Are you talking about personal gains or like guild kills?
We'll start with personal and see, how it relates.
Oh man, I don't know where to begin. Getting Cursed Vision of Sargeras, getting Warglaives. I mean, I to this day, I'm a big fan of with games finding ways to break the game. Not, maybe borderline exploit, but to a certain extent, that's even what Race to World First is all about a lot of the time, right? You find sneaky ways to do unintended things on bosses that aren't like, directly like we're going to get banned for this, but you ride that line as close as you can. And it was no different back then. I mean, I spent, when BT first came out and they announced, if you guys remember, Epic Gems, I don't even know how long as a rogue finding ways to stealth to Terran Gorfian's plateau, where there were regular mobs, not elites, those orcs, and being able to kill 3 or 4 of them with pop a blade flurry, everything, adrenaline rush, getting a gem once in a while. And that to me at the time was like the craziest thing, right? Because there's this one rogue that goes into Black Temple, the infamous Black Temple, super hard 25-man raid, all this kind of stuff, and he's getting epic gems. I'm like, man, I'm gonna make so much gold, because gold was actually kind of mattered back then, right? Make so much gold and help the guild and blah blah blah. So I mean, it's the stupid small stuff, but at the time I felt like a king, right? Yeah, it's like, oh, this, for the 20 people, they're like, oh man, this guy figured out how to like solo trash in like Black Temple and get past the this one mob that's all stealth because he like vanished at the right time in the right corner and like all this crazy stuff. So it's I don't know, it's the little things, it's the small things, it's the small things that kind of put it together.
But it's those things you hang on to, which is why I was curious about that for sure. And as a team victory for you while you were part of an actual raid team, what was the first sort of big pop off moment for you as a team?
I mean, anything, I think any, to like a not intensely competition, but still hardcore level, any of the big kills back in the day, it was a big deal back then, killing like any boss in Black Temple almost. Illidan himself was like, holy crap, we killed Jaden. That was a big one. Obviously Lich King, Yogg. Like back then, there was just different, not better or worse, right? Times have just changed, but there was just a different air about killing that big boss. In terms of, as things progressed and modernized a bit and became competitive, probably never forget Blackhand kill, World Third with Midwinter, because that was the first time we beat Blood Legion and got US first and all that kind of stuff. So that was probably one of the biggest ones. And we had gotten World First on like Iron Maidens or whatever it was in the same raid, which is like an end wing boss, and it was super hard. It was one of those like last pull of the night. It was like 6 a.m, last pull, and we're like, but it wasn't nearly as satisfying as Blackhand, which in my opinion, by the way, is still one of the best end bosses ever designed to this date. Super good boss. So yeah, I think those kind of stick in my mind, at least more back in the day kind of thing.
I certainly think a lot of people would agree with you as that being one of the most fantastic bosses, which it certainly stuck out during an expansion that not a lot of people were a huge fan of during that. So,
yeah. Warlords certainly had a lot of issues, but it was some of the best raiding the game's ever had, for sure. Yeah. It's just outside of raiding content, win some, lose some.
Yep. So as far as Jason, do you have any questions about this era and line of questioning?
I mean, that was pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. I mean, I think those moments that you have and that stick with you are the cool thing about playing this game with a wider community of people over a long period of time. I think everybody has those kind of moments that stick with you, that you remember, like, oh, it was so cool when that happened or whatever, or when we got over this milestone at this period of time. And yeah, I mean, Sloot, to your point, back when we had essentially one raid difficulty, right? I mean, there was the different size splits, and 10 was kind of naturally easier or considered to be easier for the most part. It was a little bit different where it was like, yeah, just killing a boss was a huge achievement on its own. Like that was the whole end game, was like, can you kill the end boss of this content? And in many cases, the answer was no. Like most players never killed the end boss of a raid in any given expansion back then on because there wasn't like an LFR difficulty available. There wasn't like a normal equivalent difficulty back then. So it was more about like, for a lot of players, it was like, which bosses can you kill? Like how far into this can you get? And that was sort of, that was like a banner that you kind of flew, and you could tell by what gear somebody was wearing. There was no transmog or whatever. So if they had something that came from, an in-game boss, you knew that they killed it, right? Or, just what gear they had equipped. If it wasn't something obvious like that, that was kind of how you planted your flag. And that was how you kind of identified yourself among the other people that you played with, was like, what bosses have you killed? Now it's like, it is different with the 4 different difficulties and everything. And, and with MOG and everything that the game is now at endgame, it's a bit different, but back then that was the whole difficulty ladder, was just line the bosses up. How far did you get?
Yeah. I mean, it was just different times, man. Like vastly, I mean, back then I would spend countless hours just idling in for some reason Ironforge was like the Alliance city back then.
The thing, yeah.
Either there or Shattrath in front of the Scryer Bank with just like T6 and both Warglaves, and people would just sit there and gawk, and you felt like a god. But I was just literally doing nothing. I just basket my excellence peasants as he's got 2 Warglaves. That's so cool. Like it's just a different vibe. It's like you said, there was no transmog back then. So you could see your character's achievements directly on your character. If that guy has Warglaves, he's killed Illidan many times, right? If that warrior is wearing that, that faceplate, they have T6, they've killed some Black Temple boss. Like, remember that like iconic faceplate warrior T6 that had that like spike mouth kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Cursed version of Sargeras, all that kind of stuff. It was just different vibes back then, man.
Yeah, so I'll address the Ironforge thing first. It was the hub between Menethil, which got you over to the Western Kingdom, and it was in the middle of the map. It wasn't too far south, it wasn't too far north. So everyone who was trying to form a group would sit in Ironforge on the Alliance side, because it was the fastest way to get to anywhere they needed to get to.
Yeah.
If they got a group going for something, which was interesting. Because if you remember back then, there wasn't like global chat, it was zone based. So if you went to like the actual zone where the dungeon was, you'd never find someone to actually join your group, because everyone's hanging out in a central hub. So you had to go to Ironforge to join Ironforge trade chat to be able to then be able to talk with everyone. Yeah, it was.
And traveling back then was not easy.
It was like quick. 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Like getting to like a dungeon back then was, when did they introduce summon stones? Was that a Wrath thing? I can't remember. Was that as a BC as well? Either way, it was a chore. Running a dungeon was not like a boom, let's go. Let's do a plus 20, whatever. It was like, okay, man, listen, I got to put the kids to bed. Got to get dinner out of the oven. All right. I got like 4 hours. We'll run this one dungeon. And
yep.
Yeah, the dungeon was like designed to take your whole evening, basically.
No, dungeons are serious business, man. Like, man, BC dungeons were, players were much worse back then, and the information was much lower, and making groups was much harder, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But man, the dungeons were like serious business. Like you had to, like BC dungeons, classic dungeons, Wrath, they started to take the foot off.
Yep.
The pedal a bit, and then obviously Kata, the disaster that launched at Kata. I liked it a lot, how hard the dungeons were, but the player base didn't, right? So they nerfed them. But like things were different. Now it's like people complain during an M+ if they can't pull the entire room with the boss and cleave it down, right? If like one mob does some stun, a lot of people complain, they don't like that. But back, in BC, you had to literally every pack of mobs, okay, sheep that one, sap that one, DPS this one, but drag it away so I don't cleave with my blade flurry, and then pull square, and then pull moon, and like each pack was like 10 minutes. Like It was insane.
Yeah, it was not uncommon to have that 2-minute conversation before you pulled about what was going to happen with it, which is actually where the whole Leroy Jenkins thing came from, was
Right.
someone going through, okay, we're going to be pulling this room full of whelps. So this is the plan that we're going to go through. And someone happens to be AFK through that whole plan and comes back and just like, screw it, let's go. And, you end up with that meme being created that is perpetuated through the years and crossed so many different genres of entertainment. It's referenced in like all sorts of things that make no sense to have any relation to World of Warcraft. It's just, it became so popular in that sense. But it all came from someone spending 12 minutes describing what a pull was going to be and how that pull was going to work, right? And
my first ever raid leading experience was in Serpent Shrine Cavern in Burning Crusade. And we got in there, and what was it? Hydros was the first boss, something like that. The big water guy. And you had about 3 platforms worth of trash with like the fungal lords and some Naga and stuff. And man, group of 25 people, whatever, sitting there, and I read and went through every ability of every trash mob for like an hour and a half, maybe. We didn't pull trash at all because we had to. Oh man, I mean, it was like extremely unnecessary. I mean, you have to know a bit. Right. It was like, hey, CC this guy. This guy does a frontal, but I was like, okay, so this guy does this, and I'd read like the entire paragraph that was on Alakazam or whatever at the time, and holy, and I got some people are like, oh, maybe we should just go and like try it. I was like, yeah, I guess, whatever. We wiped on like the first pull.
I was going to say, I'm sure it all paid off because everybody was listening intently and executed very well after you spent all that time explaining it.
What a disaster! Yeah, trash and raids was a night like in madness too, right? Now people just death skip trash, but back then, like just trash and raids in Burning Crusade was basically just the raid version of the dungeons. Each pull had to be CC'd, and like it was just crazy stuff, man.
Well, something we haven't talked about those days that actually touches on a good point is we've had conversations before, and you've had conversations with your community before about the right length of progression for a raid tier. And that sort of being that window of, it could be like 9 days or, 8-day kind of range for some people. Sort of depends on what they're sort of looking at. Back then, I remember spending weeks on a boss. Yep. Like I think Kale Floss was one where we spent 3 weeks or 4 weeks actually getting Kale down. And that was progression of, 3 to 4 nights a week of raiding, and you're spending 4 hours a night inside that raid at least. And, Kale had that 1.5, 2 minute intro conversation that he does before you actually pull him. And everyone had legendary weapons, and the gravity turns off, and there's all sorts of things with that fight that were pretty challenging for folks. But the progression window that we see now for a team clearing the entire raid at that level is, it is that 1 week to 10 days or 14 days, depending on the extremity of a raid. But we're talking about one boss. Like, do you remember a boss? Like, was it Illidan for you? What was the boss that you guys spent like a month on, kind of thing?
I mean, it was honestly a ton of them back then, right? Like, it's just every boss is just, it's like I said earlier, though, it was just a different vibe back then. You didn't have those same resources. You didn't have, I mean, I'm sure we'll start getting into, modern race world for stuff later, so I'm not going to jump into it too much, but it was just different, man. You didn't have staff, you didn't have money, you didn't have alts, you didn't have the same gear, you didn't have a dungeon journal, you didn't have a 21st man raid leader, you didn't have any of that kind of stuff. It was tough for sure. Yeah. And I think just frankly, your average player back then was way less skilled than today. You don't have 19 years of Warcraft under your belt back then, right? A lot more casual folk, and I want to check out, what's this raid? I heard this cool game. Let's get in there. Is raiding for me? Maybe not, right?
Yeah. Well, and as you mentioned, the online resources for how to do something properly or how to min-max were much smaller. So the average player wasn't able to go to an Icy Veins or a Wowhead and pull up a rotation and sort of figure that out. They learned through asking someone else who was doing something better than them, right? So you sort of like, okay, I'm playing a mage. There's this other mage on my team. He seems to out-DPS me. So what are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, I have this talent that's different, or, I'm using my potion at a different time, or wow, you aren't even using this ability. You need to be using this ability. Oh, you don't have an offhand equipped because you thought that one-handed sword was fine. Like, yeah, you need an offhand. It has stats on it. You're going to use it, or whatever it was, right? Like that. Those sorts of those are the days.
You don't have an enhancement shaman in your group giving you Wind Fury on a rogue.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Let's rotate them in for Bloodlust or heroism back, for House Alliance.
Yeah, you don't have a Shadow Priest being a mana battery for the whole team and generating mana for people, right? Like back in those days, there was a lot of factors that went into that. So, and it was a lot harder to track them. So yeah, but if you're good, Jason, let's move into the more, progressed time.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And Sloot just kind of touched on it as well. So let's, talk about more kind of the modern times and sort of, stepping into, full-time. WoW is like it's a career. It's streaming is my profession. I play WoW and I'm known as a WoW player on the internet, and I'm playing WoW at the absolute highest levels in kind of a more modern context of the game.
Yeah. So how did you make the transition from deciding to stop doing web design and just go streaming? How did that become like that? That was probably a fairly large leap at the time.
Yeah. So the decision to full-time stream, I had been trying to get partnered on Twitch for months. And they did it was different back then, right? Obviously it was early on. You basically had to know people at Twitch or talk to them directly, and there was no nice online official app with metrics you needed. It was more like, come on, bro, help a brother out, and I couldn't get it throughout all of TOT, and then the stream had grown to whatever it had grown at the time, and then with with SOO around the corner, Siege of Orgrimmar towards the end of MOP, I started going harder and harder and harder, and we did well, and Midwinter did well, and Throne of Thunder, and the stream was picking up, and I was starting to do alts, and I was like, listen, guys, and I was like, PTR or whatever, or Siege of Orgrimmar is coming out, stream's gonna be big then, I promise, things are gonna pop off. It's a really big time, because raids were hugely anticipated back then, patches, right? And MOP was a lot of people's favorite expansion as well. So the final raid coming out with Garrosh and everything, spoiler. It was a big deal. So I was like, hey, listen, man, I think this is, a good time for partnership. It's going to help you guys. It's going to help me. There's going to be a lot of traffic. And they're like, all right, man, let's do it. And then as soon as that, switch happened, took a bit of time to see how finances would be. And I was like, yeah, I think we're good, man. Let's take the foot off the foot off the pedal a bit with web design. I mean, I still kind of had it in the back pocket. I would still do the odd job for the one client that I still had that we'd been working together for a long time. So I didn't completely cold turkey it. More or less I did, but I do some spot work for her. But yeah, that was the swap. It was just getting partnered and taking that leap of faith kind of thing. Huh? Which you just have to do with content creation, right? There's never going to be a time. I mean, unless you're just, some people strike gold right away, right? I mean, you're just in the right place at the right time. Your stream booms and you're good to go. But otherwise, you'll always have to kind of take that leap of faith a bit and see how it goes.
So Siege of Orgrimmar is coming out. You've gotten partnered on Twitch. You are going full time into the streaming, into the World of Warcraft. And you are now playing your Paladin as your main. This would be the time where there's more of the alts thing coming up. So was Paladin all you were bringing into Siege, or were you also bringing other tanks into this?
No, Siege is, I remember, and again, it's hard to claim these things because, I can only claim them as far as the public is concerned and as far as who in the community and whatever.
Right. There might have been someone sitting in their basement who's not known who actually accomplished something.
Yeah. Now, as far as I know, I was the first, and I became friends with Trekkie increasingly because he was also prop paladin guy with Method. I was the first guy, and then Trekkie started getting into it too. I was one of the first people that was like, hey guys, listen, I don't want to be one of the best prop paladins. I want to be one of the best tanks. So my mission for SOO is to level all the tanks, do all the tanks, all the alts, all that kind of stuff. Clear Siege of Orgrimmar on every tank eventually, and then that's when the descent into madness happened, basically. And then, so that's what I'm saying. I don't want to be like, I'm the one who invented like all,
Sure.
Obviously not, but like I certainly helped push in that direction. And then people in Method started doing it, people in Midwinter and Blood Legion, and just like that was yet another step up of the infinite amount of steps that is the development of Race to World First, right? And competitive edge and that kind of stuff. So I had every tank ready to go. I did progress on Prop Paladin as far as I remember. Oh, Blackfuse, that was another good boss. Midwinter World Third on Blackfuse. But yeah, no, I remember killing Garrosh in every tank eventually. I think I killed it on Paladin, and you had to have a monk obviously on Garrosh back then because you needed to Dizzying Haze kite the mobs in a massive circle nonstop around his room, if you guys remember that. Yep. So so the go-to back then was basically Paladin and Monk. I think Warriors started creeping in too because they were doing ludicrous things with Shield Slam and Vengeance in terms of damage output. But yeah.
Nice. Okay. Jason, do you have a question around this era?
I don't think I had anything specific on that. I mean, I guess like when you really started making a concerted push for World First, I guess it does make me think of something, I guess, a bit more specific. Like, obviously there had to be a jump in mentality from like, okay, I like this game and I like playing and I want to be really good at it. I want to find an edge. I want to be better than the next guy on the meters or whatever the case may be. I want to kill one more boss than anybody else in the server. As you kind of take that step up, and I mean, you kind of described earlier, like climbing the ladder, like finding new guilds to apply to and stuff. Like, what did you start to learn about like how to approach the game, or what changed about, I guess, your viewpoint as you start going from that, this game is really good and I want to be fun. I want to have fun with it. I want to be good at it, to I want to be among the best in the world at it. Like, what was the learning curve like there?
I don't know, because I feel like to a certain extent, I was always part of that development rather than joining the game when there was already just, craziness happening with Race to World First. And you're learning, like, I was part, like, I was up there with, as Race to World First started taking off more and more, I was always there in the scene. I was always helping develop it. I was always talking to other people that were helping develop it. I was always seeing what other guilds were doing. So there was never really a time. I mean, I guess, if we're to go like way back again, probably joining Midwinter was that, like, it at the time at least switched from hardcore to like, we're going like super hardcore. We're going for like to try to be the best kind of thing. And then after that, it was all just, you were always up there with everyone else, part of the developing scene.
So what kind of stuff would you do to maybe keep an eye on what other people in the scene were doing? Like, I guess it's a bit easier now because like a lot of people stream everything that they play, right? And I mean, as recently as like Legion, a lot of racing teams wouldn't even stream their initial raids and kills on bosses. So like, how did you keep an eye on what the other top teams were doing in terms of builds or strats or comps or anything like that?
Yeah, I had a hand in that, by the way, the streaming.
That's it's true.
Later.
Yeah.
Honestly, just chat. I like I said, I was friends with Trekkie. I became friends with Sko back then. People, it's not too different than it is today. Obviously, there's more teams, associated with it in streaming and, personalities now on Twitch. But back then, it really is, the meme that is the 0.1% of like raiders, because it is the 0.001% of raiders. I mean, there was Method, there was Blood Legion, there's Midwinter for the most part back then, right? I mean, I don't want to disrespect. There's obviously some other guilds, top 5, top 10, but it's not a lot of people, man. Right? It's sub 100 people. So you talk to Sko, you talk to Trekkie, you talk to Sloot, you talk to Rig, people talk, right? You meet each other at BlizzCon, right? Like the first BlizzCons I ever went to, the legendary Midwinter house parties, right? In those parties, there were Midwinter and Rig and Blood Legion came, and Sko and Trekkie and Method came, and it was just all of the dudes hanging out, all of the competing teams. You just talk and you whisper, right? If Method got a boss kill, I'd be like, hey, Tranky, all right, what's going on? What'd you guys do on this boss? It's just stuff like that.
Oh, so even though there was this kind of like barrier of cone of silence that would happen between these teams because they were competing, you still had that's the appearance, right? The appearance from community very much was that there was like an iron curtain between each of these teams. Everything was super secret. Everything was super competitive. No one could share anything. People were getting kicked off teams if they publicly shared a strategy or something like that. But inside, the back rooms for you is, when it came down to it, you and, the 70 or 80 other people who did this, there were a lot of people who were not competitive as much with each other individually and more so as a team. And so you would share strategy or share ideas, concepts, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, the first part of what you said is true. Like there was, there's never disrespectful, but I wouldn't literally go to somebody in Meth and be like, hey, how'd you guys kill this boss? Right. I just get a reply with like a winky face or something. Yeah. So any strategy talk would really just come after the tier was done. Right. Right. And I don't need to remind you guys, because we're all old farts here. But, back then, like you said, Twitch didn't exist. And even when Twitch existed, and started to exist in the MOP and whatever, and people started streaming raids wasn't a thing till mid-Legion. Back then it was nobody streamed, dead silence, and people are just refreshing WoW progress to see X out of 13 or whatever. Right. 9 out of 13, 10 out of 13, and that's oh my, this guild killed it, holy crap. And then there was that unspoken respectful rule of no team uploads their kill video until the world first team does it, and then the world second team does it, and Method would always wait until 5 people killed it, and then they would release their world first video. And the cool thing that I liked about it back then versus what it is now is because of this radio silence that you're talking about, Spencer, you literally had no idea. So when kill videos would come out, you'd go, oh wow, what a crazy strat, why didn't we think of that? Or you would have the crazy strat and they'd go, oh wow, that's so clever, that's so cool that they did that, right? That there's a little more, understandably, a higher level of like homogenization now with comps and strategies, right? Because you watch Liquid do it, and then Echo do it, and then BDG do it, and everyone, the information's there. Why struggle? Maybe you adapt, but everybody more or less runs the same tanks and more or less runs the same healers. Maybe there's like one healer swap, and people are like, oh, why are they using a Resto Druid? But you don't have that like crazy disparity in strategy and comp and that kind of stuff that you did back then.
But and part of that I think goes towards speaking to the accessibility change that Blizzard sort of pushed, as well as the community sort of pushed, to trying to get more people into the scene. Yeah, it was such a restrictive thing back then. Jason talked about it being incredibly common to be part of a raid team that just never clears a raid tier. And at some point along the lines, the decision was kind of made of like, well, we're going to put out different difficulties, and LFR came out, and we're talking about MOP era, where Blizzard wanted people to be able to experience that content and be able to see that content for themselves. And so I think there was a bit of a shift that happened both community side and development side towards getting more people into the scene and more exposure. And then that lent itself to, okay, let's start exposing strategies sooner. Let's start sharing more details as far as, Warcraft logs sort of stuff started bleeding out for compositions and that sort of thing. And you still have people who private log, and it's still, that private information for certain teams as to what they want to do. But it just, as the internet exploded in its own right and gaming in general grew, the desire for knowledge grew, and people took advantage of that as business would in any kind of shape to get more people involved in it. So no, I think it's neat to hear about the days when, as I said, sort of like the Iron Curtain was there, where it was like, hey, no, and you talked about the mutual respect of not sharing kill videos until certain milestones had been accomplished by different teams. And there was that surprising and exciting thing for a lot of teams of, as you said, why did they choose to bring these classes? What was the niche thing they were doing with that helped the kill videos? And remember, kill videos back then too, and they still are to a certain point now, they aren't just sitting from one person's point of view watching the fight all the way through. They were a mishmash of all the different DPS and tanks point of view that someone had produced and put together with a title slide and epic music and that sort of thing. And so there were times where you were dissecting those videos because you had to try and keep track of what actually was happening in this timeline as they bounced around person to person, right? I wouldn't have been surprised if there was some intentional hiding of certain things by cutting away from people to not show what that special move or person was doing.
The amount of Linkin Park MP3 downloads that increased every tier kill was phenomenal.
Man, those were
remember
days.
like anytime a raid got cleared for the first time, like refreshing MMO champ every day, waiting for the kill video to get posted or whatever. Yeah, that was a whole different universe.
And the picture, waiting for that picture on the front with everybody neatly. People don't do that kind of stuff anymore, man. Like the picture in front of the boss kill,
like the team photo in front of the corpse, the treasure chest or whatever.
Stuff.
Yeah. There's very few teams who still take advantage of that and do it. And back then, as the internet was what it was, now there's Discord. There were websites, and so all these things would be hosted on websites. So, Midwinter had a website, and on their website they'd post all of their, kill pictures with their team standing in front of the bosses, and
they'd have a blog on the front page.
Yeah, and it was a different era in that kind of team-based sport, as far as how people found those teams and applied to them. And that's an interesting question. So while you were on I guess Midwinter, because you eventually became the guild leader of Midwinter down the line.
No, officer / raid leader.
Raid leader. Okay.
Raid leader, yeah. I was never GM. Yeah.
So you would have been involved in the application process to the team. How did that kind of evolve over the time that you were in Midwinter? Let's just focus on that time period while you were in Midwinter for people applying.
Oh, that is a good question. How did it evolve? I think most of it you can track based on the levels of information and tracking that developed with WoW over time, right? So, BC era, you didn't have logs and kill videos. I mean, I don't know, maybe people frapped or something once in a while, but you didn't have that kind of stuff, right? It was like, what are your credentials? Well, I've killed Illidan because I have a Warglaive, and they're like, oh, see, I killed Illidan. Let's go. Right. Back then, your credential was how many bosses of this raid have you killed? I'm 7 out of 8. I'm 8 out of 8. I'm 6. That was like how you were judged in terms of, and then, Warcraft logs came out, DPS meters came out. People started not screenshotting their desktop, but taking pictures of their monitor with the DP, things like that. So really, it's just the application as a result, applications to guilds as a result, that cutting edge guilds would start asking for these things, right? Do you have a PoE video of your Lei Shen kill, right? On YouTube somewhere? Do you have damage meters? Do you have references is an old one, right? There was those references like, hey, how's this? How's this guy? He's applied to our guild, blah blah blah.
Was interviewing always part of that process? Yeah. There was always a sit down chat. Do you fit in with our team? Interview conversation.
Yeah, back when it was a little more done through like whispers. A lot of the time, it wasn't always like get in voice and let's chat. I would say that was more of like a kata development thing, maybe late Wrath thing, but that was not like an official, some guilds did it, some guilds didn't.
Yeah.
As far as I was concerned, there was more or less usually always voice because you wanted to talk about stuff, right? You wanted to, I don't know, that's just how you did it.
Get in your Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or Roger Wilco and have a conversation about things.
Or Mumble.
Yeah. We'll back that.
Yeah. It was, and obviously it's developed into what it is today, right? You can go to any top guild site and look at what they ask, right? It's logs, references, any, videos, blah, 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 things like that. It's whatever information's there that people can use to gauge how well you play the game and what kind of experience you have, it'll get asked, right? And that's just how it developed over the years.
Yeah, it was an interesting process when I got into Death Jesters and doing mythic raiding with them. They even had people come in who had looked at your logs, who would then ask questions about the decisions you'd made based off of the logs that they looked at for recent kills that had taken place that you'd submitted, which I also thought was interesting. That the interview process continued to expand to being more and more and more detailed and more serious of a thing to be applying for. And it's just such a large step away from, hey, I know this guy, he's pretty good, let's try him out, right? And that sort of being the early versions of joining a raid team to, as we move towards that race to world first, you watch that process become more professional because, as you said, money starts being involved. And so it almost made sense for the raid leaders and the teams to start treating applicants more like they're applying for a job than they're applying for, just a fun time on a raid team. So you decided along the lines while you were raid leading for Midwinter that it was time to make a move from that situation. Where did you go next?
That was a little that was a little bit of drama time now.
It was. Whether or not you want to talk about that or not is up to you.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. So I was again, always take this with an asterisk or a hint of salt. Yep. I was the first little star, major raid or whatever that did the whole region swap. Right? It was like unheard of at the time. So I had been in talks with Method. And I remember getting into a Skype call with SCO and Just Wait at the time and talking about it. And they're like, yeah, we'll let you know tomorrow. And then got the thumbs up. They're like, let's go. Sloot Method, right? It's going to happen. Because they were the powerhouse, right? They were the world first back then.
Well, and you had friends there that you've been playing with or talking with for a long time. I didn't realize you've been gaming with them, but yeah.
Right. So I had an EU account already at the time because, I was doing a lot of community runs back then and in Warlords of Draenor, I would do both factions, both regions every week. Oftentimes hungover. It was a terrible, terrible situation. If you have not experienced raid leading and frustration in playing this game, if you've not explained how to do the Eye of Iskar in HFC to a different pug every week, 4 times a week, like explaining it like they're a baby.
Yep.
And they mess it up. And I was like, anyways. so I had, in talks with Method, and I was going to go to Method. The next day, the drama happened, right? Like literally the next day, the Serenity Method drama happened, right? Where the entirety of the Method team, except for Roger Brown, SCO, and Just Wait at the time, basically just left. They're like, we don't want to be with Method anymore. Whatever issues they had, I forget exactly what it was. There were some disagreements. SCO was a very business brain guy, right? So he kept trying to push things, and the team just wanted to jam and play the game. And I don't know what it was in its entirety, but it was a lot of disagreements like that. Basically, the entire team left, except for those 3, and they made Serenity. So I was in a very weird situation, right? Because I was supposed to go to Method. Method, for all intents and purposes, dissipated, right? Yeah. And at the time, Kuznam, world first raid leader, all those guys went and made Serenity, and they're like, yo, we need a tank. You're the guy. Come, they all came in my Twitch chat, guys I've barely ever talked to. It's like, hey, Slooty, come, Slooty boy, like all this stuff. Fragnance was there, all the guys, and I was like, oh, I feel so loved, So I, it definitely caused a bit of drama and strain, and then SCO and I kind of weren't friends for a while. Well, he was obviously upset with me, but everything, this is back in the day. Everything's fine now. But it was, I was making what at the time was a very unheard of move to switch regions rating, and you really leave all your eggs in one basket. And the same today, you start fresh, right? There is no, hey, can I bring my stuff from NA? Can I bring my Ashes of Valar and my Mim's head and all that? No, it's a brand new account, man. You have 0. No, that was on to you, actually.
I know.
You have 0 gold. You have 0 anything. You are a brand new World of Warcraft player as far as an account standing is concerned at that point. So that move was tough for me, right? It was a big deal. So and I was going to do it because I wanted a tank in the best guild in the world at the time, in Method. Method no longer existed, right? 95% of Method was now Serenity, and they were going to be the best in the world. And that's where I wanted to make the move. And I was even told by the 3 guys left over in Method, they're like, listen, man, like, you came here for a reason, and the 3 of us don't know what we're going to do. We can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
So I was like, listen, I'm sorry. The smart move for me is to join Serenity, because that's literally why I left Midwinter after 6 years or whatever, right?
You want to join the team. And so if the team split and moved, then you're still going to join the team. Yeah.
This goes back into what you were saying, right? It's your $15 a month kind of thing.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not that, it's not that like cut and dry, right? There's obviously human emotion and that kind of stuff involved.
With Method, there's a business involved. So it's also the
there's a business at the time, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's essentially what happened. Method somehow rose from the ashes there. And then did it again later. We're now on Method 3.0, if you've lost track at this point in modern day. But yeah, so that's what happened. It was just the weirdest blind side for everybody, right? The Serenity Method drama back then. But yeah, and then I went over to you for 6 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned in there of running your chat and your stream and your viewership, your community that you built through content, and that had sort of taken off. So basically, during your Twitch partnership, you'd mentioned that things were going well and it was kind of becoming more of a career for you, and you'd sort of solidified yourself as this tank lead for the community at whole, and then of course for the actual raiding scene. How was it to sort of build that community? Was it really grassroots, kind of you're figuring out as you went, or did you have 5-year plans, or what was your sort of ideas as things sort of came along for building your community?
For better or worse, there was no major foresight with anything, right? I just kind of I was just a guy that really liked playing World of Warcraft and got really good at it, and analyzed tanks and played all the tanks in ways other people didn't. I don't mean necessarily at a skill level. I mean, not everybody bothered to make all 5, eventually 6 tanks and spreadsheet them and figure out and learn how, armor DR is calculated and how DR is calculated in the game and this and that. And, and then I guess word of mouth and, community runs and always talking to people in chat and answering questions and farming your Garrison 6 times a day. Because there was nothing else to do. Man, I went into the mine literally 6 times a day, or 5 times a day at the time, right? Every alt, because there's just literally nothing else to do outside of raiding. But I didn't do any variety gaming back then, right? It was just WoW, so you have to do something.
Okay, so let's, all right. I was gonna say let's have an early conversation about the feeling of needing to generate content for your channel on a regular basis, which is not hard to do when you have 6 characters with daily chores that you're trying to do for that, with the enjoyment of actually doing that.
Okay.
Because there's two different sides to this, right? There's the average World of Warcraft player who feels the obligation from time to time to keep up with their friends or the game or the pace of the game. So they need to do their chores regularly. And some people enjoy those things. Some people don't. Some people really liked BFA getting, as the Azerite power. Some people hated it. But for you, there's like another layer, because you also now have a point where your audience expects you to be playing a certain game and on a regular basis, at this stage, right, that we're talking about, this time frame when you're making that move to Serenity, and you have to sort of balance this being a job with, am I enjoying this as your passion for what you're actually choosing to do on your channel? So how are you mentally holding up during this time period with the chores in the game and the chores of World of Warcraft work?
I mean, during the Serenity time period, fine, right? A lot of the downtime in content, Warlords was pretty tough, right?
No.
Warlords was a time when, at least in the streaming community, when it was just basically like me and Tally, right? Like we were like the only guys that really stuck to the guns and did all the boring stuff nonstop. When other people were like, "Man, I'm out of here," or like, "I'm gonna try a different game" or whatever. But because, a lot of that time was naturally filled up with because of the competitive nature, right? So you did like, I joked about the 5 tunes, the 5 alts, but it did fill up a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I got to get my warrior's shield. Hey, I didn't do my monk's, garrison mine. Hey, a lot of stuff wasn't account wide back then. Hey, I got to do the Tanan jungle quest line 5 times, so by today's standards, you go insane. And I mean, I just did 15 characters for 10.1, right?
Yep.
Or 12 characters. So, and here I am, no hair. But back then, because of, like you're saying, passion for the game and, increasing demands as that escalated over time for Race to World First, and I was trying to, be on the cutting edge of stuff and being the tank lead, like you said, and all that, a lot of it kind of just naturally fell into place, right? Like I don't remember ever waking up back then and going, "Oh, what do I do today on stream?" Like there's nothing to do. It was always like, today's like DK day, right? We got to do like the DK for this and this. Like there was always something.
Yeah, your drive was there, present for
my drive was there, and my interest in, there was enough. I got really into like mount farming and mini pet farming and achievement hunting and, just being a World of Warcraft player combined with the super hardcore top end stuff was more than enough stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe we'll get to it later, but yeah, somewhere along the line that passion kind of fizzled out, right? That desire to really, both eventually for raiding, because here I am, but also that desire to play the game outside of, just play the game for the game, go collect the mount, go do a fun little quest line, right? Yeah, I mean, that shift of business and pleasure kind of over time, it did really become a job rather than a fun thing. I think going to EU the first time probably pushed it a little in that direction, because prior to that, I did spend a lot of time in like Warlords and stuff, raiding with leashes, achievements, and mini pets, and I'd gotten Mim's Head and a world first Paladin Yogg solo, and I was very into that stuff, right? Just fun self challenges, and what can I solo, and blah blah blah. But when he went to EU, and you lost Invincible, and you lost Mim's Head, and you lost Ashes of Alar, and you lost all those mini pets that you spent hundreds of hours trying to get, it's kind of like I don't want to go do that again, man. And then I think that's when it started shifting a little, and then things started ramping up more and more, right? Serenity, Future, BDG, Liquid, Echo, like all it is just, that's when things just ramped exponentially, and it took over more as a job rather than a pleasure.
Yeah,
it was both for a while, but
Yeah, we'll dip more into that mentality shift for you as we get farther into it, but. I wanted to get a snapshot of you still having the drive, you still having the passion, it still being, you wake up and you're like, I want to go play World of Warcraft, I want to get this stuff done, this is what I need to do today, and that still being sort of where you were at, because we're progressing towards the Legion timeline here, which is where Mythic Plus scene started up, and where you first sort of started looking at a new competitive scene, a new competitive esport around World of Warcraft that was starting to blossom, and you were, one of the voices they chose to represent that, because you got into doing MDI.
That's right.
And you went and you did a Legion announcement. You were in EU for Gamescom doing a Legion announcement for things, and there was
for Carazon.
Yeah, there was a lot of big shifts and big changes around your life and the community and the growth around this. So. Let's touch on MDI. What was it like for you getting approached by Blizzard to go, hey, we want to do a competition and we want you to be one of the casters for this.
You know, it was a little behind, like under the hood. It didn't develop the way you're saying as much. It wasn't like an out of nowhere thing. So I was talking a lot with like Morgan Day and Ian back in the day at Gamescom. And, you know, with their announcements with Mythic Plus and kind of the development of that. And I was talking a lot with them. And that's back in the day when I can't remember. There was a PvP community run tournament thing. And he eventually got hired at Blizzard and worked as the PvP guy. Dave Hollings, I'm gonna say.
D Machine, I think, is he?
Yeah, D Machine, exactly. Yeah. But I forgot what it was called. Either way, there was basically like a community run tournament thing. And you know, I went to them at Gamescom and I was like, hey man, with M Plus coming out, I think it would be, you know, PvP is a little easier to community do, but for M Plus to do like actual races, you need a little bit of support from Blizzard, right? So I had this idea. I was like, man, just like they did the PvP thing, I want to do a community run dungeon race thing. So I remember going to Ian and pitching this to him and being like, hey, you know, I can't do this without you guys, but this is my idea. And they're like, oh, you know, sit tight, right?
Yeah.
There's stuff in the works. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then we got in this whole discussion about M Plus and the development of M Plus and that kind of stuff. So I kind of already like, you know, and they're like, you know, and, you know, you're going to be like, you're definitely like the main consideration for a lot of this stuff. So I already kind of had an idea that was coming. And then MDI is not the first thing they launched, right? They launched, they did like a pilot kind of dungeon race at the beginning of Legion, is a TESPA thing, I think. Cause I did a couple of TESPA castings as well. And that pilot was the first ever Blizzard hosted like dungeon race thing. And I did it with Josh, which was terrible. And Josh was the host and I was the other dude, the other
color commentator. Yep.
Yep. And we cast the dungeons together. And that was the first time ever. And then, you know, from there, I guess MDI developed. And I'll never forget that casting because I was obviously nervous, right? And they started the 30-minute timer. So the stream was already live. There was that 30-minute countdown. And I went to the bathroom about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes before. And I don't know what it was because this never happens to me. But I went and I like blew my nose and I picked my nose or something and started hemorrhaging blood out of my nose. 10 minutes before. And I'm like, oh my God. So from their POV, I just went to the bathroom and got a bloody nose. So they think I snorted Coke or something. So I come back like pouring down my hand kind of thing. So I come back with Kleenex, 10 minutes that makeup was already done, by the way, but not anymore. So if you ever find a VOD of that, at some point the timer gets extended by like 15 minutes or something. It's because I was sitting there and there was 5 people around me all trying to stop the bleeding. I was sitting like this with my nose pinched back. The makeup lady, I had a Kleenex in my nose while the makeup lady's reworking the makeup around it. And I remember if we finally sit down in the cast, which they obviously delayed, like I said, and I look at Josh. Josh and I didn't, you know, we weren't such good friends back then. I like we knew each other, right? Like, and I go, Lore, if at any point my nose starts bleeding, say something or like tap me or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we'll pull the camera off you too. Don't worry. So I had to do the entire cast because of, you know, constant rubbing here and makeup and bleeding. My kind of nostril area was very sensitive and on fire. So I felt the entire cast, like my nose, like all I could think about was my nose was going to start bleeding or was bleeding. Yeah. So even during the cast, like you probably saw me go like this, like a few times to like in my mustache and stuff because I thought it was like bleeding. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a disaster. The cast itself went well though. And then, you know, that eventually led to the big boy MDI stuff that they took over and another TESPA run at some point because that was run by different people, but and then MDI for I don't know 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years, something like that before I tapped out.
Yeah, it was certainly the birth of something that's become very exciting and now an integral feature of the game that people love, and it's tied in so many ways in this current expansion that we're in. But hearing sort of your beginnings in it and the growth of that scene, did you always feel like similarly with the Race to World First scene, like you were on the inside track? They were always consulting with you. They'd bring you in to talk about changes that could be coming up for future expansions or to the MDI, the race itself, like that whole concept. Did you feel like you were on the inside?
Yeah, for the MDI, for sure. I mean, as inside as I could be, right? It's not like it's not like I sat at the meetings when they were talking about the first, like once they reached out, but like, a lot of the development of MDI or early MDI of the years when they tried different things and, band picks and all that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, there were meetings with the groups there and that kind of stuff, right? I mean, Jack was there, like stuff like that. Like there was a lot of exactly what you're thinking, like brainstorming and idea bouncing and like, hey, there's negative feedback about this, or, what can we do to spice it up, or, whatever. What can we do? We like this Seat of the Triumvirate bloodbath 2-hour run between 400 deaths on each team, or that kind of stuff. So there was, the early days were definitely a lot of like pitching of ideas and ultimately Blizzard side employee of things. I wasn't like sitting in on every meeting with all of the execs and stuff, but I mean, we were there on the front lines for sure.
Yeah. Jason, do you have a Mythic Plus or an MDI question you want to fit in?
I don't think so. I mean, that sort of like summed it up, I think, just telling the story about sort of being on the outside looking in, going, hey, I have this idea. And then like, hey, we have like a similar idea, and then collaborating on it. I mean, I certainly miss Sloot's presence on MDI broadcasts. I just want to say that publicly. It was always like my favorite part of the show as a presentation, right? Mm-hmm. Like obviously the competition is cool, and I think they've added some cool layers to it. And as we are speaking this weekend, a great push weekend is going on, which is a really cool format that they've added into the mix over the years. But I mean, Sloot is like the smartest guy in the room for the broadcast, was always like the best part about watching it. So I'm really glad that they were open to that and they included you. And it was so cool in those early days to have like PvE esports for WoW. Like it felt, I don't know, it just felt validating and important for some reason as somebody whose main interest in the game was always PvE.
I appreciate that.
Were they always accepting of your puns, or did you get some perhaps you could lean away from feedback that might have happened in there?
I was 99% in the clear.
Good.
I got talked to 2 times in all my casts and all my years and all that kind of stuff. One is I made an edging joke about DKs being edgelords, and that's what they love edging. And afterwards, they're like,
right,
okay. And then the other time wasn't actually a pun related thing, but in my smart ass nature, Shadow Priests were not in a good way back then, and I just kept dunking on them on the stream. I was like, man, I was being myself, but I was really digging into, and I think at one point I mentioned, I like dunked on Shadow Priests, and they were like, hey, can you like lean away from that a bit, because, they use the MDI internally a lot to, they were, even though there was an esports team and that kind of stuff, sorry, cat in my face, even though there was like an esports team and stuff like that, they were very closely tied and linked with like the devs, right? Like Ian, Morgan, those guys, because and ultimately Ian was the call on a lot of things, even MDI related, because MDI for them was they wanted it to be, and probably still do. I don't talk to that business, that kind of stuff with them anymore, but it was meant to be a representation of the game, right? That's why some of the restrictive rules existed, like no class stacking, blah, blah, blah. A lot of it was like, we want this to be a face for World. We want to attract new players, which is funny because it's also kind of the opposite effect, right? Because people are trying to do MDI pulls, and that led to its own issues. But but it was very much like, hey, we want you to showcase World of Warcraft. So when I was dunking on Shadow Priest constantly, well, apparently the dev wasn't very happy with me. I kept dunking on it, but also, you know, it was like, you know, for people that are like, oh, I've always heard Priest is fun, I want to play it, and then they tune into the MDI and this bald guy's like, oh lol, who put a Shadow Priest, idiot. So they're like, yeah, maybe like chill out with the, you know, class, like the picking on class, you know, like a little jab once in a while. They're like, oh, that's more rare than like a feral druid in raid, you know, like a little joke like that was okay. But yeah, apparently I went a little overboard with Shadow Priest at one point during a cast.
You touched on a subject there that I'd love to explore more, which is the top 0.01% driving the meta for the game and making players feel as though, you know, that these very few voices are the ones that everyone should listen to about how they should be experiencing the game or playing the game or participating in the game. Is this something that I know you've talked about a lot in your own time on your channel and whatnot, but this is a problem that has existed for a long time. It's not necessarily a problem, but certainly a situation that's existed for a long time where the average player, the large majority of the player base, listens to this extreme minority to get guidance about how and what they should be playing and experiencing the game. What's it been like being in that 0.01%, surrounded by other people who obviously, you know, have the same mentality of how to play the game properly at that 0.01%, but then looking out at this broad community, including your own community, that is basically taking your word as law as to how they should be experiencing World of Warcraft. So you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, that's always been an interesting topic and a little hypocritical in some senses, because myself as a person, with any game I play, obviously it's World of Warcraft for years and years and years. I hate the meta. I hate being a sheep. I hate not like I pride myself on thinking outside the box always. Even like solo world first tank on Guardian in Sanctum, right, in BDG. Just, you know, that's one of the things that always attracted me to hardcore top end rating, was how can we outsmart the devs? How can we break this boss? How can we part of the reason why I always loved Paladin is because they always had a toolkit built to be able to do that with cheat death and immunes and stuff like that, you know. So in a sense, I was always about like not ignore, you know, not stupidly ignoring the meta, even if it could be better. Like, you always need to keep tab on things, and if something is just the best, that's the way it is. But always being open to exploring different avenues, because the meta is developed by people doing that, right? Like, how are you going to know that you can't one tank a Guardian if you don't try this kind of stuff? How are you going to know, you know, if a prot warrior can't spell reflect, I don't know, Gahoon, or, you know, like, you have to try these things. So just blindly going with whatever the dude on the internet said is always something that bothered me. Now the hypocrisy comes in that I am that dude. I was that dude that would say something because people would come in for advice, right? They go, hey, what do you think's the best tank? What's the best tank in this expansion? What's the best tank in this patch? What do you use? You know, what are you using for this boss? And like, I would give advice freely, but I would always say, well, you know, people think this or I think this, but I would always encourage, and still do, like think for yourself kind of thing, right? Like, explore things, try things out, whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm not sure what more to say about that. It's always been kind of like a push and pull in that direction, right? When you are, or at least were, an authority on things, right? I mean, that's how really my stream boomed at the time and started, because I was the tank guy, right? I wasn't in method, but I was with all the big boys, right?
Yep.
But I would do things that other people wouldn't think of, or at least I would try to, even if it didn't work, kind of thing, right? But yeah, no, I don't know. It was it's always been an interesting thing, and I just think it's important to respectfully listen to people who have that experience and are good at the game or good at what they do, but like, not treat it as law, right? Like, know that piece of information, take that advice, and use that how you will to maybe explore your own avenue, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just an interesting topic to cover for you, because you are a role model as far as the game goes for so many people, and an authority for so many people when it comes to World of Warcraft over the years. Your experience and how you chose to explore different avenues of the game is what, allowed you to be that meta creator for so many different time periods of this game. So it's neat to hear from someone who was in that position then expressing, hey, I recognize that what I'm doing is not the norm, and I need to and people feel I need to explain it to them because they don't quite get why I'm choosing to do things I'm choosing to do.
Right.
But what that then becomes with sites like Warcraft Logs, okay, here's the meta thing to do. Everyone do the meta thing, and that's the expectation of you, is to be doing the meta thing. When you're the one setting those expectations, it must be a very strange feeling sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, with some things, this kind of stemmed from MDI talk, right? I mean, there are things that undeniably are just the best, right? Yep. And you should definitely spend some time considering alternatives, whatever. But if there's the best, they're the best, right? There's a reason that probably still to this date, everybody in the MDI runs more or less the same comp, right? Because when players are competitive, they'll fight. If is something a 0.2% advantage, we're using it, right? Like that's just the way it went. And there's the same in MDI, and it's always like a really interesting discussion that I don't really think there's some kind of full explanation or solution for. I've heard so many takes from so many people, and my own included, over so many years about, the more casual player base. Not like you don't need to do the meta kind of that conversation. You don't need to follow the meta to be successful. You don't need to do MDI polls. You don't, blah, blah, blah. And that's always just, there's so many facets to that discussion. And it's always such a rabbit hole to go down because there's just so many angles, right? Some people don't have the time, so they follow the meta. Some people, but the interesting thing is, and to a certain extent, the detrimental thing is the way that's affected the community over the years, right? There's MDI this season used Guardian Druids. Oh, you're not a Guardian Druid, sorry, you can't do our +10. You're not no Og Evoker. Sorry, dude.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry. You play what? A DK? There's 0 DKs in top clears on Raider.io right now. Sorry, dude. Can't come to our +5 for the week. It's just crazy stuff like that. But it's been a discussion for so many years, but it hasn't changed, right? And it won't change. And in a way, it's almost gotten worse. This expansion has gotten, and I can't remember what they did about Dragonflight, but I remember saying like, oh, this is going to make things even harder for pugging. And it did. I can't remember. Maybe you guys can. It's like they made keys harder, or I don't remember exactly what it was. But
they did change the per rank scaling, for each key level. I think they increased it. So, +1 is a bigger stat increase than it used to be.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what it was. But either way, it's something that's going to continue to plague, is maybe a bit of a rough word, but like honestly plague the game in terms of hug keys. I mean, even to this date, I don't obviously play that much WoW anymore. I don't play WoW anymore currently, at least. But I still get people complaining about pug experiences. Obviously a ton of the community over all these years on, Twitter, or X now, that I, follow and interact with. I mean, I don't think I can load in a timeline ever on a daily basis that doesn't have some complaints about class balance in WoW, or the meta in MDI, or the meta in M+, or people getting rejected from keys even though they have like a 3.5 IO main and things like that. So it was both a blessing and a curse, the MDI, as far as like the community is involved.
Yeah. So okay. So you have a few years of MDI in sort of its height. You make the decision to sort of exit from that scene. And we're sort of starting to hit that point, I think, you can flesh this out, where you're considering it feeling more like this is shifting, that balance of work and play and fun and drive is kind of shifting more towards work as you sort of start to hit that point.
Yeah, it was definitely, there was never a wall I hit, right, where I woke up one day and I'm like, it has shifted.
Yeah.
The meta has shifted in my brain.
In your brain.
It was definitely a gradual thing that, looking back now that I've kind of taken a step away, I'm like, you kind of go outside your yourself and take a look and be like, man, I'm really not, how long have I been like this? How long have I not been enjoying things? But yeah, I mean, stepping away from the NDI, that was definitely in the midst of like, doing, man, I mean, before I started multi-boxing, I remember I was doing for, competitive stuff, even in Future, which obviously Future was a lower rank than, what I obviously did with Serenity and BDG and Midwinter. But they were still like super hardcore. Like, I mean, we did all the hours and stuff, top 20. I mean, I would spend literal 10 to 12 hour streams before I started multi-boxing doing Azerite swoops on 6 characters.
Yeah.
Because it would take about 1 to 2 hours to do a full BFA swoop, right, of everything. And you log into the next tank, and then the DK, and then the Paladin, and then the Monk, right? And that's when it started being like, okay, I literally just spent the entire day like
doing the same
prepping.
thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, thank God I stream because it kept me sane, because we can make memes and joke and talk, but like, man, and it just, and then the MDI casting, and then I started just getting interested in other games. I remember like Borderlands 3 was coming out, and like Dark Souls 3, and I was like, that looks fun. Watching like others, like Lyric do like Dark Souls 3 back in the day. I was like, that looks fun, man. It's like, I want to try this, right? But in the back of my head, there was definitely always that fear of like, but I'm the WoW guy, right? If I don't play WoW, am I screwed? And that was the fear. And honestly, even to this day, even after almost 11 years of streaming, I still have that fear in the back of my head, because over the years, I've lost a lot of numbers and subs moving away from WoW. But it's just like you said, spend like at some point, like, I don't know, what's the right move? Mental health and happiness, or do you keep slaving away? And I just, at some point, man, I couldn't do the M+ thing anymore. It was draining. Like, kudos to the people that still do it, Nagura and Now and all that kind of stuff. But man, I just like logging in every day. I was just miserable. And it started detracting from stream in its own sense. Like, people can see that, they feel that energy, right? They see that you're just like, oh God, I got raid tonight. Like, it's not a fun environment to be in. So, yeah, I don't know. It progressed. It like over. Sorry, just to kind of sum it up. Like, over the years, like, I was, back in the young days. You guys are making me all nostalgic now. Back in the young days, it was like full-fledged WoW, 100%. Everything is fun. Collecting mini pets, farming rep in BC, blah blah blah. And then that shift happened where I went to EU, and that casual love of it fell off, especially because I lost all the mounts and stuff. But the dungeons were still there, and the competitive nature is still there, right? And I kept hammering that. Then at some point along the line, probably BFA-ish, with MDI, I just completely burned out on dungeons, and it just became chores. And well, here we are 19 years later, and the last pillar that was still standing, which was raiding, also fell, right? Like, it was just it's too much work. Like, if you don't have, like, I've said this on stream before too, I couldn't remember, and I still can't now, the last time that I woke up and you have that feeling towards a game where you're just thinking about it and you can't wait to log on. Baldur's Gate 3 is coming out. Tons of people excited about that. Diablo 4 came out. Like, that feeling, that like excitement, man, it's been a hot minute. Dragonflight, I was like, oh, here we go again. Like Shadowlands, here we go again. Okay, I got to do the beta thing. I got to stream it. I got to try every class. I got to level every tank. Like, it was just a business. Like, that like innocent, like, I'm super excited. It's been a long time. And deep down, it sucks. And I hate it, because I really, really want to play WoW. I want to love WoW. I really do. But it's been so long of like forced login. Man, I haven't done a weekly M+ key in months. Like, except for obviously when we're ramping up Race to World First, right? You do a ton of keys. But then after that, man, which is probably not great, right? Still being in a competitive guild, but
right.
like literally, like, not a single key on one tune, because I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Like, that's how burned out I was.
Yeah.
And hopefully this step away is not permanent, right? I want to be excited, right? Maybe 10.2 comes out with an absolute banger. Maybe 11.0 is just a crazy expansion. I'm like, here we go, right? Yeah. But that forced, like, weekly routine login was a huge drag constantly.
We talked with Josh Devilor,
unlucky,
when when he was leaving Blizzard, and he'd sort of made the shift. And one of the things he talked about was the excitement he had for a period of time when World of Warcraft was going to be happening, where he didn't know what was going to be coming. He wasn't spoiled on what was coming up because he was a part of the team and was around it. And I do think that childlike wonder that you talked about, that addictive grind of waking up in the morning earlier than you expected to, because your brain just like snaps awake and is like, you need to go and play this game. Like, this game is you're into it. You have this list of things you need to do, that you felt for World of Warcraft back, in the Warlords days. That drive you felt of waking up and wanting to do your garrisons every day and wanting to do those things every day, because you had that list of that you wanted to check off, and you found it enjoyable. When that starts to fade, and as you mentioned, becomes a business for you, because that is your business of streaming, that is a real milestone in your mind, a marker that pops up where you need to pay attention to it and listen to it and decide, what's best for you. And so I understand listening to that, but for timeline's sake, so you decided that you were stepping away from MDI, stuff was becoming too much more of a business. You're moving to a place rating wise where rating is more of a job, and you make a decision to move to an organization that has more financial support, financial gain, the height of the race scene for you, not necessarily best placements, but Big Dumb Guild being a pretty big shift. They were getting picked up by Golden Guardians. They were offering some opportunities for you financially. This is Shadowlands, I think, when you made this move.
Yeah, it was during Castle Nathria Farm.
Yeah. So
back to NA we go.
That's right. This is where the Brutosaur comes in.
Yes. Yes. The real downfall of why I don't play WoW anymore.
Exactly. that was the pillar. The Brutosaur was the pillar that was holding up the rest of the foundation. Things have been crumbling since then. Back to NA. You made the switch. You joined an organization. At this point, you've been on EU long enough that, as you talked about, that sort of wonder of collecting the casual stuff about the game has kind of gone away. It's you play to raid, and you play for the competition.
I was on EU long enough that you can't help that a bit of that love kind of comes back, right?
You got a Brutosaur, so yeah.
Yeah, I got a Brutosaur, and it was like 5-6 years on EU, right? So you get Jaina's mount, and you get this mount, and you get that mount, and you start getting the Brutosaur. You do start getting some rare stuff and being like, okay, maybe maybe I can start doing this again. I actually went into Tempest Keep and got ashes on my second try on the EU as well. And I was kind of like, maybe we do this again, and then didn't, right? But
yeah.
But I definitely still had. I was starting to build that kind of passion up again, and then Eternal Palace as well. When Nazjatar came out, that patch, that was a banger patch. What was that? 8.2, something like that. 9.2. No, 8.2. 8.2. I was. Even then, I was trying to get World First Flying unlock there, because I was finding ways to grind little bits of rep and do crazy stuff to unlock flying. So people would be like, how's he getting flying already? Can't get that for 3 weeks. So that was fun and completely unnecessary for, race to world first progression stuff. So I still had moments of that drive of fun and, mount collecting and achievement in Nazjatar. That was a fun patch for me. But, I mean, like you're saying, and then, back to NA afterward, I was like, okay, well, now I got half my rare mounts here and half my rare mounts here. And I want to kind of, honestly, I'm really curious how I would have felt if Blizzard was like, yes, we can combine all of that for you in 1 giga account. I would have been like, hey, that might have actually just shaped things differently for me, right? But having half and half, and the Brutosaur is gone now, and I just spent 5 million gold, and that was, I didn't. It was hard to feel like I had a home anywhere anymore, right? It was hard to feel like grounded in WoW, right? I felt like kind of like just a renegade for hire at this point. I was just going where the rating was, and it was that innocent boy with hair from 19 years ago is not there. The guy that was happy to collect a little mini pet and cursed vision of Sargeras isn't there anymore, right? It's just let's go to the next top end raid scene, because that's what I've been doing for 19 years.
Well, and this I just want to pop in for like this draws a parallel between what you were doing and professional athletes, of being on the road, being a part of a team, being traded around, not having a home. This is all very similar kind of feeling to what a lot of these other, actual athletes or go through. Of your alliances aren't so much to the people that you're surrounded by. You're friends with them. You're coworkers with them. You're able to enjoy the company of them when you're on the team. But it is kind of that feeling of, I could get traded or move on to something else at any time. And so there's less of having that home and having that, this is where I've been for the last 8 years and I'm going to stay here. And, Jason just recently made a move from the server that he started his characters on in Belgun over to Storm Rage with his team. And just because of, lack of population and lack of server mergers, it seemed like a good move for his team to make. So they're actually a part of the Death Jesters Zero to Heroes community now with his team, and have sort of seen that influx of, hey, I've joined this larger community, this larger group, and do you lose some of that, that feeling that he had of his own little small group? Yes, but you get exposed to something new. For you, sure. It's moving as an individual. He moved with the whole team. You move as an individual around. And so I just wanted to draw the parallels there between this, like, you're a pitcher for a team who gets traded around a bunch kind of idea is a similar kind of feeling of what you're going through. Yeah.
And I mean, for whatever it matters or not, like, for the record, the move to BDG was never financial. Like, it had zero. I mean, it was nice. It was like, here's a bit of money. I was like, cool. And there was, a couple of times when I was like, oh, you don't have to pay me my monthly, you pay the other people, right?
Right.
So the BDG thing was never like, that's an interesting, I don't know if we're going to get into that, like the development of Race to World First into what it is now. It's an interesting discussion because money's a big driver these days, right?
Yeah, I think I would save that one for a time when I can have yourself and Max and a few of the other people on at the same time to really talk about how that developed and birthed into being financially stable.
Yeah, but it is interesting, right? Because prior, back in the Serenity era, before, I mean, just so we get everything straight here, right? Yeah. Everybody, like, streaming hardcore rating and top end rating started with me and Future, and at the time as well, I think BDG. No, they not really. It was Future and myself. And there was an Asian guild, I can't remember if it was Alpha or Stars, that were also streaming in Tomb of Sargeras. And they, the rest of the guilds, Method and everyone, it was still the old school thing, right? You hide your strats, blah, blah, blah. But now all of a sudden, Sloot the douche and everybody else is streaming the raids and all the cool secret stuff that the top end guys are doing. Now they're showing it, like. And it got to a breaking point, and I knew the Race World First thing was going to happen because it got to a breaking point where that same Asian guild, the same Chinese guild in Argus, was literally streaming Argus progression on Mythic on the final phase before Method had killed it.
Right.
So whatever Method was doing, the cat's already out of the bag. All the cool stuff was seen. There was no big end.
Sorry. I was going to say that mutual respect of waiting until the World First team had, was gone.
But it was even mutual respect because it was just a different avenue, right? It wasn't like a respect of we kill it, wait till these guys release the video. Mm-hmm. It was like, we don't owe anyone anything, man. We're going to stream progression and that's that. So this guild, and Future was streaming too. We weren't as good as this Chinese guild. We were on Agrimar at the time, or just getting to Argus, but Argus was, all the hype of like, oh, what does the Mythic only phase look like? And blah, blah, blah. Let's wait for the World First YouTube. That was dead on the spot because it was just being streamed live. Everyone saw it. So obviously it was going to happen. So what happened literally the next tier, which was the first tier of BFA, Method announced Race to World First, commercialized, right? That's when it officially started. But the makings of that started with Tomb of Sargeras and Argus with Future and I can't remember the Chinese guild. It was Stars or Alpha. I can't remember. Those two guilds paved the road, and then Method commercialized it at the beginning of BFA, and here we are, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as that commercialization happened and sponsors got on board and money got involved, that is when Method had always, they were an org before, so they always paid their raiders a bit, or they paid them to stream, that kind of stuff. But that flip is when it ignited, like money got involved, like money and sponsors really got involved. It became a commercialized event, and that innocence of, I don't want to say innocence, but like that just passion of a bunch of dudes and gals wanting to hardcore raid and just be the best. Those people that left Method because they made Serenity because all they wanted to do was jam on the game and be the best, that was dead. That's when it ended, right? And then it became, obviously there's still people that want to be the best, but that's when the shift happened. And it's funny because you asked earlier, and one of the things I didn't mention, but now I remember, that's when the shift happened of on applications. And I see this all the time in BDG, or saw it, right, when I was still with them. One of the first questions you get asked when people are talking about joining BDG Liquid, how much you guys pay per month? How much money? This never existed before BFA, but that is the main driver, and without blame or shame, right? A lot of these people are young, they're it's different. For me, I'm not everyone's in my position that's been streaming for 11 years and made a career out of it that can join BDG, and I'm like, I don't care about the money. I'm here to raid, right? Yeah. That's not the reality for a lot of people that are college or still living at home, trying to, make a buck, trying to grow their stream, trying to whatever. And that became and still is a major problem for BDG, poaching from Liquid, like every tier, 3 to 4 or 5 players. And it's just like, hey, like, dude, I love it here, but money. Yeah. It's just they pay way more money. Like I need the money. I need to pay my rent. I need a whatever. Everybody does, right? You got to live. But yeah, that flip in commercialization, I don't want to get too deep into it. Like you said, maybe we'll have a different episode, but that flipped commercialization that started at the beginning of BFA with Method turning it into like a big event and broadcast sponsor, whatever, whoever they had back then, whatever, that was the start of it into what it is now. Money. In a way it's understandable. In a way it's kind of sad to see, because that was the end of an era of rating for the pure competition and love of it. And now it's like, there is competition. Of course there's love of it. I don't want to say people hate themselves for rating right now, but a lot of it is business driven. Big business drive.
Yeah. In that scene that you live in. Yeah. Yeah. It's,
yeah.
Well, thank you for diving into that a little bit more, because it definitely leads into something that, I do want to talk about on the show at some point going forward, when we can get all the right heads together who are involved in that commercialization sort of starting up and happening, because I think it'd be a really cool topic to cover, which sounds like you have input on. So we'll certainly reach out again.
I've played the game once in a
while, every now and then. It's every now and then. So all right, let's move towards sort of what the realization was for you and to take the next leap, right? We've talked about, in order to get into streaming full time, there's never a great point. There's never a right time, unless you have, as you said, that explosion sort of unique happened for an individual, that you just sort of took this leap into doing full-time streaming, and you managed to get the partnership going with Twitch. You're now doing another leap into variety. You're leaping away from World of Warcraft. The retirement of for the foreseeable of World of Warcraft for you has meant that you're now making the shift into a more variety of games that you're covering. And so how was that process for you decision wise? Like what was the realization for you?
I think it's something that's already been here for a long time. So, for any member of my community that's been there for a while, nothing has really changed, right? It's not like I made the big announcement on Twitter and it got around and, oh my God, Sloot was the last OG homie and he's fallen now too. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I was streaming WoW 12 hours a day, and then starting now 0 WoW. I for all intents and purposes, I've been a variety streamer for basically since like Nathria Farm when I joined BDG, right? I've been doing more or less variety gaming, but obviously maintaining WoW. And when the Race World first starts, cranking that. So it's like nothing but WoW for, a month, whatever.
If I can draw a parallel, it would be you continuing to do the web hosting when you first started streaming.
Yeah,
right.
It's
in
a sense
a similar thing.
I didn't binge web design for a month at a time, but
exactly. Yep. Exactly. Right.
But you know, I did enough, and I was still passionate, obviously, about hardcore raiding. So I did enough, and still, you know, went above and beyond in terms of analysis and tanks and prep and stuff. I always went above and beyond prep all the time, right? Prepping for bosses, and all my tanks and everything and strats. But any downtime during farm was really just variety, so nothing changed. That shift, I would say the major shift, honestly, away from WoW was that burnout with M plus in BFA or whatever. That's when I was like, started to step more away from WoW and embrace variety. And it wasn't easy, and it still isn't easy, right? Because just like I said earlier, it's money, put food on the table. I mean, you know, I lost like 75% of my viewership and my subs switching away from WoW. It is what it is, right? Because you establish a stream and a community based on one video game for 6 years. The 6 years of the stream and Twitch existing, plus 10 before that, right? So to, you know, move away all of a sudden from that is super jarring for a lot of people that are here. Hey, I'm only here for tank advice, dude. Hey, I'm here to watch Sloot, the pro tank guy, not Sloot, the Dark Souls 3 player. I don't give a crap about that. I want to, and then as Twitch developed and more people were doing it, there's been other great players that have come to the scene now, right? Now I tanked with, you know, now was like a disciple of mine. He was, you know, a protege. We tanked in Future together. We were going to tank in Serenity together, and then he stepped back, and then we tanked in Future together. And look what he's grown into now. He's one of the best tanks in the world, right? By credentials, he probably is the best tank in the world right now. Well, he stepped back from rating, but you know what I mean. Nonetheless,
yeah.
So with me taking a step back, but also a great amount of other players and Twitch booming in popularity, and it was easy for people to get their fix elsewhere that weren't particularly married to me as a personality or my community. If they just cared about World of Warcraft rating, top end rating, and tanking, it's not just Sloot anymore. It was basically just Sloot, more or less Trekkie SCO in Warlords. It's now 50 people, right? You go to Now stream, you go to if you go to Sloot stream, you go to Mears' stream, you go to whatever, right? You go to Lighty's stream, Ben now, who obviously quit as well. Like there's so many options that it's become a big personality game rather than, you know. So it wasn't easy, dude, and it still isn't easy. And it's something that it's like, you know, I grinded for years and years and years for WoW. Everything was great. I got burned out to the point where it's a really tough career decision, because it's like, okay, well, do I maintain these numbers that are good, that are making good money, that are helping the stream grow or sustain, but be miserable doing it increasingly every day? Like, do I take that continued mental hit every day? At what point do I put my foot down? And I tried, and at some point you're just like, man, this isn't living, right?
Yeah.
I'll take the financial hit, I'll take the stream hit, or whatever, because I want to be happy. Right? Yeah. I want to be happy playing whatever. And for the people that don't watch anymore, because I don't tank 12 hours a day, you know, thank you for being there when you were, but right, like I want to move forward and be happy and grow with a community that is there for whatever, not just there for just the tanking, and they'll drop you at the, you know, drop of a pin, so to speak, the moment you boogie on out. So it was tough, man. It's tough. It was tough at the end of Nathria when that shift kind of started happening. And it's still tough now. Like, it's still tough to this day, but nothing really changed, like I said, with the announcement of my retirement, because for all intents and purposes, my streaming life has already been that way for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I think the weird one is going to be, you know, this past week was the first week I literally was done. Like I had my last raid the week before. Yep. So it was weird. It's Tuesday, and I was like, oh, I got raid. Oh no, I don't have raid tonight. You know, the weird one's going to be when 10-2 hits, right? Not being part of that Race to World First for the first time literally ever in World of Warcraft, that's going to be weird. I'm curious to see how I feel about that, if it's going to make me a little, but right now, like, Tuesday passed and I was like, oh, good. I have more time to play whatever video game now.
Yep.
Instead of like feeling like I need to log on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting experience for you when obviously the next raid comes out. You were talking about not earning cutting edge, not getting mount, not having like the feeling that I had when I stepped away from Mythic Raiding was that I was missing out on all of these things that I just were given. It was just like
FOMO.
Part of my process of playing the game meant that I just got these rewards. That was just something I had. Of course I had all of this transmog unlocked, and I had this really cool mount, and I had this, et cetera, in this case, all these dragon riding, appearances and whatnot. But by stepping back from that scene, there's this peak that I had of feeling that way, and then it just tapered off once you've missed enough stuff. Once you've missed enough stuff, you're like, well, I'm far enough behind anyways.
Yeah, the missing stuff for me naturally came because of NAEUNA again.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? What was telling to me was literally the last raid a week and a half ago that I had. Mm-hmm. The last Sarkareth kill, the last boss I'm ever going to do for maybe who knows, maybe unretire, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
The last Sark mythic kill on my main paladin, I got the mount and gave it away.
Right.
I looted it from the chest.
Yeah.
And we had a community. We didn't have a buyer in. We had like one of our community members that does crafting.
Yeah.
He was in there, and they go, "Oh, well, maybe one of the mounts should go to him." I traded it.
Yeah.
I felt zero remorse, like zero, like, oh God, I really wanted that.
Yeah.
So I just don't care. Not in like a bad, terrible screw wow way.
No, it's just changing mentality.
Just like, I just don't care.
Yeah.
I was like, that's fine. So that FOMO feeling is like, I know what you're describing, mm-hmm. But there's been too many hits to that at this point with the Brutosaur, and that is just kind of like, meh,
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. Because truly, that CE rating and everything was, that's, the one that was always there. So we'll see how I feel in 10 too. Mm-hmm. But right now I've not had any like, regrets or weird feelings. I definitely got a little emo about it, and it was sad, right? I mean, it truly is the end of an era, 19 years, right, of doing this. But I mean, all good things must come to an end eventually.
Yeah.
I want to flip it around the other way, because like obviously this is a big inflection point for you in terms of being like a streamer and entertainer. What are you excited about? Like, what are the opportunities you're looking forward to with your platform? Like, what games do you want to get into and showcase and have fun with? And how do you want to build up the community around those games maybe?
Game wise, I don't think, I've weirdly enough been asked this before as well. It's hard to, definitely what I don't want to do is get myself in another WoW situation, right? Where it's like, hey guys, I'm maining Diablo 4 for the next 5 years, right? And then I'm like, okay, I'm not interested in Diablo 4 anymore. And then everyone leaves again. It's kind of like, oh, here we go again. But I think just the way gaming has developed and the way my brain has developed and everything, it's hard for me to get married to one game. I usually camp one, I'm playing a lot of Remnant 2 right now, and Baldur's Gate 3 coming out, and then Star Citizen, and then, maybe I will check out 10 2 whenever that comes out, that kind of stuff. I think the main thing here is all that time that I would spend on WoW usually is now opened up to help just grow the community in variety, right? And grow the channel. And what I've done now, because it's, I guess, like the first week, is really I just use that time to stream even more, which I probably shouldn't do. But what I want to do is just grow all over the place, right? So, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. And the healthiest thing, like WoW aside, the best kind of streaming, as long as the streamer is happy doing it, is being able to have a community that is just there no matter what, right? That they're there for the community, they're there for the streamer. Game agnostic kind of thing, right? And that's kind of the trap. Trap's like a negative word, but that's the situation I found myself in with WoW, right? Most of the people that were there not for the community to a certain extent, not for I love Sloot, he's so funny, maybe. They were there because I was one of the best with tanking and I gave advice and blah, 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 blah. And as soon as that rug was swept out from under them, it's kind of like, well, I'm not particularly married to this guy or the community. Okay, bye. Right. So that's really the dream with content creation is having those like evergreen viewers and subs. I don't know how to describe it. Like the people that are just there because they love.
Yeah.
They're there for you. They're there for the community.
Yeah.
Even if it's not me, like I see people all the time just, hey, good to see you today, person X. Oh, hey, person Y. Like, it's so, how was your job interview yesterday? Like fostering that kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the extra time to foster that kind of growth and natural growth and regrind, so to speak, that level of core and grow it and variety is challenging, but that's the goal right now, rather than lean on being a pro in one game kind of thing. I did that, man. That was young Sloot. I gotta I'm old now, dude. I want to just sit on my front porch with a shotgun and play games.
Well, I certainly think that you've always been an entertaining personality and a good dude to watch for any of the games, because you do involve your community in a big way when it comes to answering questions and having thoughts, sharing opinions. You're big on that. Often, a lot of your streams can open with upwards of an hour of just conversation with your chat, trying to actually share opinions on things. So I wish you the best with obviously continuing on with the foundation as far as the next place you're going with it. I look forward to more YouTube stuff and other content that you're going to be generating over the next period of time, and excited to see where things go, in the future with it for you.
And who knows? Maybe I'll come back to, everyone always says you never really quit WoW. Maybe I have no, there's World of Warcraft is a weird game because I've seen people come and go with this game over the years, as you guys have as well. Mm-hmm. And there's this weird syndrome where a bunch of people always like aggressively quit the game and then bash it like it's an X and a bad breakup and every jab they can. And it's always the weirdest thing to me. And it's nothing like that. Like, I don't like hate WoW. I still have a deep, profound love of WoW. I hope that in the future, maybe this step away will reignite that, kid Christmas morning feeling of you wake up and you're like, oh, that looks like some fun new WoW content. Let's go,
Yeah.
Oh, let's go, try this new tank build because they revamped the warrior tree or whatever, right? And I'm hoping that comes back to me, right? And I don't know, maybe I'm like, oh, let's go, right? To reverse again, unretire, right? But I can't give that opportunity to the game if I were to miserably force log on every week. So I have to step away from that environment to give it the opportunity to foster that again, hopefully, to let that bloom, right? That's where my mind's at with it. So it's not like an aggressive, like, I hate WoW, I'm never playing it again. It's the worst game ever. It's like I because I love you, I have to leave you. I have to step away for now.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah. Having the extra time in the evenings alone where you're not just doing maintenance mode for farm is
right.
A surprisingly amount of freed up time that allows you to really, as you said, foster something different and check it out. And who knows, maybe in 6 months we'll bring you on for your competitive pet battling that you're doing now and min-maxing the whole thing. Who knows?
You never know. There's not sometimes, even with myself, I'm like over analyzing. I'm like, oh, where did it go wrong? Where did I, the reality is, man, I've been doing it for 19 years of leveling 12 tunes. I did 12 tunes this expansion, like 6 paladins, and keeping up and helping, develop this ever increasing ridiculousness of race to world first meta and fishing on tunes for 14 hours a day to get 50 rep for Tuskar. And there's you will stop at nothing because the race world first is so unregulated and it's always been this way, right? Like every team always does every little small thing to get that advantage. And it's just when you do it for 19 years, it's kind of like, okay, man, listen, I had a nice flowing golden locks of hair when I started this. Now I don't. It's time to maybe take a step back and I don't know, just chill out for a bit. Maybe the drive comes back, maybe it doesn't, but it's not doing anyone any service, including the BDG, the team I was playing with, to start hating the game and hating logging in and lose that passion, right? You start to lose that competitive edge. Your viewers see that you're miserable. But people are saying all the time, they're like, man, just your face, dude, when you're like doing your second heroic of the week, it's just not good, and like you just look miserable. And I'm like, I'm trying not to,
Yeah.
right? But when you're doing your 7th paladin and heroic number 3, and only a month after you just finished progression, it gets a little much.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll start wrapping up then. I want to just take a moment and thank our patrons for everything they contribute to our show, because it lets us do all these extra episodes for the hosting and everything that costs in there. So thank you very much for that. Patreon.com/thestartingzone if you're interested in hopping in and doing support for the show as well. We also obviously appreciate reviews when they're left for us over on iTunes and Apple Podcast. This has been episode 589 of The Starting Zone, where you can find out some notes, and there'll be links to all Sloot's content stuff over on thestartingzone.com if you're looking to find that sort of thing. And if you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question or whatnot, you can reach out to us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or on Twitter, or you can, well, I guess it's X now, or thestartingzone.com/Discord. You can join our Discord channel if that's something you're interested in doing. Jason, why don't you do the first plug, and we'll leave the second plug for Sloot.
Sure. I just want to say, Ted, thanks for coming on, man. Great ride. Congrats on it. And thanks for being so generous with TSZ over the years. I hope this isn't your farewell appearance. I hope we talk to you again on the show someday. And I mean, you've always been a super genuine and generous dude to the show and to me personally for many years now. So thank you so much, and congrats on everything. And I hope you have bright things in the future with the stream and everything, and have fun with it, man. That's the number one thing. And as far as I go, if you want to see what I'm doing, yeah, you can find me on Twitter, or you can go to x.com now, I guess, because Elon did buy the domain this week. So he still has Twitter, so you can find me over there. I do still read and post on it, so whatever, come say hi. And you can find me streaming on twitch.tv/Shieldwald, and Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Sundays usually for raids and dungeons and hanging out and stuff. And sometimes on YouTube as well at youtube.com/Shieldwald. I do have a channel over there, but usually my internet is so bad lately I can barely play the game, let alone stream it to more than one place, which I assume is just Comcast infrastructure melting in the summer heat.
That entirely could be exactly that. Their nodes might be on fire. And Sloot, for folks who want to continue following and be part of your community, whereabouts can they find all of your stuff?
Well, most of my stuff is in the usual place, twitch.tv/Sloot. Well, you know, if this hangout was a little while from now, there's going to be a couple of new YouTube channels and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. But for now, twitch.tv, x.com/Slootbag, Slootbag on Twitter. And that'll guide you into what is coming next.
Awesome. Yeah, great. And as Jason said, thanks so much for always being, generous with the community. Me and you met way back in the Midwinter days, with bringing you on board for Convert to Raid podcast way back then. And, we've sort of gotten closer and closer since to now we hang out and play Fall Guys until early hours of the mornings. It's been wonderful having you be a part of the TSZ show stuff. And as Jason said, I mean, even if it's just bringing you on for a BlizzCon show or something, it might be a really good time to still get you involved every now and then. And
sure,
we've talked about doing an episode around the Race to World first scene and how it birthed and where it's gone and how that experience has been for folks. And I would love to have you be a part of that. But yeah, man, thanks so much. I wish you the best with everything going forward. And, I'll drive up and visit you at some point soon here. So
sure,
we'll get that going on, man. Yeah. All right. If folks want to find me, you can find me on x.com or on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD, or on youtube.com at SpencerHD. And man, with that, for Sloot, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and job's done.